I accomplished it for him, and now he understands how to do it even better. Authentic tales of forbidden love. The vast expanse of the ocean lay before us, moonlight dancing upon its restless waves. I savored a sip of my beer, the salt lingering on my lips, as the cool night breeze danced through my loose curls. Next to me, Jordan extended his long legs into the sand, his fashionable sneakers partially submerged. He tilted his head back, savoring each slow sip. He sighed, eyes closed, body relaxed and at ease next to me. Nothing compares to this moment. I smiled, observing him from the periphery of my vision. He was correct. Evenings such as this, just the two of us by the water, sharing laughter, conversing about both trivial and profound matters. It was our special bond. You already sound like an old man, I teased. He smiled, tilting his head in my direction. It seems like you're ready for a confrontation. I chuckled, shaking my head in disbelief. Oh, come on, you know I could take you, Jordan scoffed, stretching his arms over his broad chest, flashing a confident smile. In what realm? I gently prodded his arm with my elbow, and he laughed, a deep, rich sound that had always been my favorite. Jordan has been everything to me since the moment he entered this world. It had always been only the two of us. No partner. No father in the picture. Only Cassie and Jordan, united as a duo. He contemplated, staring out at the water. I share with my friends just how amazing my mom is, yet they always seem skeptical. Well, you should definitely advise them to ensure their facts are accurate, I remarked. He wore a sly grin. I attempt to convey my thoughts, yet they believe I'm fabricating it. No mother is aware of all the things we discuss. I raised an eyebrow. So. They really don't discuss that kind of stuff with their moms, it seems not. I savored another sip of my beer, a grin spreading across my face. Perhaps their mothers simply don't measure up to my level of awesomeness. Jordan laughed softly, yet an underlying emotion lingered in the air. A gentle quality in his expression. Something contemplative. He gazed at me for an extended moment, as though weighing his words carefully. Do you ever sense that others simply fail to understand us? He inquired. I blinked, taken aback by the change in his tone. What do you mean? Jordan swept a hand through his hair, momentarily diverting his gaze. I can observe the dynamics between other mothers and their sons. It stands apart. They all seem so awkward and distant. They aren't playful like we are. They don't simply relax like this. He hesitated, fiddling with the label on his beer bottle. It seems that some individuals are unsure of how to interpret it. I allowed his words to linger. He was not mistaken. Comments have always been made about how youthful my behavior is. How unconventional it seems. It was that Jordan shared all the details with me, yet, that was simply us. I always hoped he wouldn't feel the need to conceal any part of who he is. I wished for him to realize that my understanding would remain unwavering, regardless of the circumstances. Well, I finally said, shrugging. Many individuals fail to grasp numerous concepts. It doesn't imply that we need to alter ourselves for their sake. Jordan offered a faint smile, yet his eyes retained a depth of quiet contemplation. Indeed, he replied after a brief pause. You are correct. Quietness lingered in the space between us. However, it wasn't unpleasant. Only the waves, the faint echoes of the city linger in the background. After a moment he asked, do you ever feel lonely, Mom? I looked at him in astonishment. What prompts that question? Jordan paused, his fingers brushing thoughtfully against his jaw. I'm uncertain, lost in thought. I gazed at the water, deep in thought. Sometimes, I must confess it, however, not in a melancholic manner. Well, you see, time flies by swiftly, individuals arrive and depart. Jordan nodded. He said, turning to face me. You possess beauty and intelligence. You could have anyone you desired. A gentle warmth spread through me at the genuine tone of his voice. I gestured with my hand, brushing it aside. I don't require all of that. Why not? I took another sip, exhaling softly. Because I feel joy. I have my tasks, my existence, and I have you. Jordan locked eyes with me. Something indecipherable danced in his gaze. That's not quite the same, he murmured. I observed him for a moment, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the manner in which his hands curved in the sand. "You're aware that you're my top choice in basketball, aren't you?" I nudged his shoulder, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. That brought a smile to his face, yet it fell just short of his gaze. Indeed, unaware, the night lingered endlessly. We allowed the dialogue to meander back to more cheerful topics. Melodies and hoops, the strange antics individuals engaged in at the gym, eventually. I reclined on my elbows, gazing up at the sky. "All right, kid. We should probably make our way back before you start complaining about the cold," Jordan scoffed, rising to his feet and extending his hand to me. "Kindly. We both understand I could remain out here for hours on end." I grasped his hand, allowing him to lift me up. "You're becoming quite seasoned, Mom," he playfully mocked while I brushed the sand from my jeans. "Listen, I'm going to leave you out here," I retaliated. He chuckled, draping an arm around my shoulders as we headed back up the shore. As we strolled, the sensation washed over me once more. The silent connection that lingers between us, that comprehension, the bond that had consistently distinguished us from all others. Jordan and I. We formed our own unique family, and no one else needed to comprehend it but us. The echo of the waves remained in my ears, although we had departed from the beach hours earlier. Jordan had taken me home before going out with his friends. As I settled onto the couch with a glass of wine, my mind drifted to the words he had shared earlier. "Do you really not consider the idea of dating again?" It had been a simple question, yet the manner in which he posed it, the gentle inflection of his voice, had caused me to stop. From a young age, he consistently showed a strong sense of protectiveness towards me. At the age of 6, he would grasp my hand tightly in the grocery store, casting fierce glares at any man who dared to look at me for too long. When he reached as a teenager, he took on the role of my unofficial protector, swiftly deflecting any unwanted attention from strangers. At 22, he remained unchanged, ever vigilant, always ensuring my well-being. I let out a deep breath, my head shaking slightly. My mind is consumed by my own reflections. I was okay. I had my projects, my companions, my existence, and I had Jordan. That sufficed. The following morning, I rose early in preparation for my shift at the clinic. Being a urologist had its challenges, but my passion for the work made it all worthwhile. A decade in a private practice had provided me with a consistent flow of patients who placed their trust in me. And I had established a reputation not only for being a skilled doctor but also for ensuring that people felt at ease. That was significant in my profession, particularly for men who occasionally required a bit more encouragement. By lunchtime, I had already attended to a dozen patients, the majority of whom were familiar faces. Mr. Thompson, the retired Marine, entered with his familiar complaint, yet it seemed he was primarily seeking a conversation. A jittery college student walked in, firmly believing he was suffering from a grave ailment, only for me to inform him that it was merely a matter of hydration and rest that would set him right. Then there were the businessmen, clad in sharp suits, exuding confidence, until they found themselves sitting across from me, discussing their health. That was when all the bravado faded, and they turned into just like everyone else. It was approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I received a text from Jordan. "Jordan. Hello, are you at home? I remain at my place of employment. What's going on?" "Jordan has nothing. I'm curious about when you'll return." That was peculiar. Jordan typically found himself saying he was too busy to come home early, rather than the opposite. "I am delayed. I've got a packed agenda today." "Are you well?" A lengthy silence hung in the air before he finally replied, "Indeed, Jordan." I squinted at my phone. Jordan never simply responded with a casual, "Yeah," when something was troubling him. Perhaps he was simply fatigued. Perhaps he experienced a disagreement with one of his companions. As I arrived in the driveway, I noticed his car was already waiting there. That was not out of the ordinary. Jordan moved in and out at his whim, yet the house was unusually silent when I entered, a rarity indeed. Typically, there was music emanating from his room, or the sound of the television drifting in from the living room. Yet this evening there is silence. "Jordan, I announced the act of placing my bag down. No response. I walked down the hall and paused in front of the bathroom door. It was shut tight, and the water was still, yet I could sense a presence within. I tapped gently. Hey, are you doing well in there? A moment of stillness. Then his voice was somewhat strained. Indeed. I'm doing well. I scowled. You've been in there for quite some time. Another pause lingered in the air. At last. It's just fine, Mom. That was everything I needed to understand. It was certainly not nothing. Jordan was never the type to hold back, especially not around me. We discussed a wide range of topics. At times, it felt like an excess of information. If he was behaving strangely, something was amiss. Jordan. I spoke softly. I am your mother, and I practice medicine. If there's an issue, I'd prefer you to discuss it with me rather than staying in there all night acting like everything is okay. Yet another prolonged pause, then, at last, the lock clicked. And the door creaked open just a fraction. Jordan avoided making eye contact with me at first. He rested against the doorframe, arms folded, his jaw clenched. You'll find this amusing, he murmured. I arched an eyebrow. Have I ever found humor in something serious regarding you? Jordan let out a deep sigh, his hand moving wearily across his face. He appeared utterly drained. He confessed that he believed something was amiss. It feels incorrect down there. That was everything I required to know. I slipped past him into the bathroom, my instincts as a writer kicking in. Share with me the current situation. I stated, maintaining a calm and professional tone. Jordan appeared uneasy, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. He was typically so confident, so self-assured. Yet, at that moment, he appeared nearly ashamed. All day, he remarked, it has felt strange. It wasn't quite pain, but there was a moment of hesitation. I'm uncertain. Distinct. I gave a nod. When did it begin? He let out a breath. This morning. Subsequently, you understand. I let out a deep breath. Jordan, I am your mother, not someone who can read your thoughts. After what? He cast a bashful glance my way, following I shared the night with someone. That came as no shock. Jordan possessed striking good looks and undeniable charm. Jordan let out a deep groan. Mother. Jordan, I stated with conviction. It's not a significant matter. If there's an issue, I'd prefer you to be aware of it now rather than waiting for it to escalate. He let out a deep sigh, massaging his temples with weary fingers. All right. I smiled, gently squeezing his arm. It might be nothing, but it's always wise to be cautious, wouldn't you agree? Jordan nodded, a hint of relief washing over him as some of the tension slipped away from his shoulders. Indeed, thank you, Mom. I smiled slyly. Look, that wasn't too difficult. Jordan sighed in exasperation. I had a feeling you were going to insist I visit the clinic. Absolutely, I remarked, playfully tousling his hair before stepping out of the bathroom, and just like that, the effortless flow between us returned. The results came back normal. What I required was simply some cream for a span of 5 days. Upon our return home, Jordan suggested giving me a massage, expressing his desire to try out a technique he had discovered on YouTube. I readily accepted. After a bath, the warmth of Jordan's hands lingered on my feet long after his fingers had departed. I wiggled my toes slightly, as if testing the space between us, ensuring that whatever had crackled in the air during his touch had dissipated. It had not. It continued to resonate beneath my skin. Faint yet unmistakable. He reclined on the couch, extending his arms behind his head, his biceps subtly flexing in the gentle light of the lamp. I feigned ignorance instead. His eyes half closed as he looked my way. That was enjoyable, he reflected, a smile playing at the edges of his mouth. We really struggle with bachata, to be honest. I chuckled. I playfully nudged his thigh with mine. Nope, that was certainly you. He laughed softly, and the sound wrapped around me like a beloved melody, comforting and natural. It had always been this way with Jordan, simple, organic. And yet, tonight, there was an unmistakable change in the air, a subtle shift in the very fabric of reality that was impossible to overlook. Hey, he said after a moment, his voice now gentler, have you ever pondered how life might have unfolded if circumstances had taken a different turn? I furrowed my brow, shifting to meet his gaze more directly. In what ways is it different? He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the beer bottle in his hand, rolling it thoughtfully between his fingers. I'm uncertain. Simply unique. If you weren't my mother. I felt my breath catch, but I concealed it swiftly, managing to let out a laugh. You mean if I had never known you? His head jerked up, his eyes probing into mine. No, he replied swiftly, almost too swiftly. I simply don't have the answer. You know, had we crossed paths in another existence, as various individuals. At the contour of his jaw, the rhythm of his fingers lightly drumming against the glass bottle. I gulped. That's an unusual thought to ponder. I finally spoke, my voice softer than I had meant it to be. Jordan let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head slightly. Never mind what I mentioned. However, I chose not to. I was unable to. The night lingered, the beer diminishing, the laughter shared between us fading into a gentle hush. At one moment, Jordan stretched, his shirt rising just enough to expose a hint of his abdomen, before he lowered it once more, the dancing glow from the television throwing shadows across the walls. I ought to have told him to go to bed, should have asserted myself, stretched, and created some space between us. However, I did not. Instead, he moved in a little closer, allowing his thigh to lightly graze against mine. I tilted my head just a bit, discovering his gaze fixed on me. The silence in the room was almost palpable. The beer is too warm. The distance that separates us is far too limited. Is it, Jordan? I whispered, unaware of what was about to unfold. Express. He smiled, then a slow, knowing thing. Indeed. I paused, seeking the perfect words. Something that would place whatever this was back into the tidy little compartment it was meant for. Yet, just as I was about to say something, he leaned in. It stayed longer, his fingers, warm against my skin, grazed the curve of my cheek before retreating. Something in my chest tightened. I let out a forced laugh, rising suddenly and reaching for the empty beer bottles. All right, that's it. It's time to hit the hay. Jordan smirked, reclining against the couch as he observed me. Indeed. I suppose so. Yet I stirred awake to the sound of Jordan's voice calling me. His manner, it was laid back and easygoing, yet there was an intriguing quality to it. There was something subtly distinct. Yet I couldn't quite identify what it was, wiping the drowsiness from my. With a glance, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and padded toward the bathroom where he was waiting. He stood by the sink, shirtless, his body lean yet strong, a testament to his dedication. He had matured. The boy who once held tightly to my side, who relied on me to tie his shoes and slice his sandwiches into triangles, had transformed into a man, tall and confident in ways that still surprised me. He smiled as I walked in, tilting his head toward the tube of cream on the counter. He mentioned that I should apply it twice a day, but I want to ensure I'm doing it correctly, he said, his voice casual and light. I nodded, moving in closer, my instincts as a storyteller taking over. Explaining things and teaching patients how to care for themselves came effortlessly to me. Jordan, though he is my son, was in this moment just another individual seeking direction. In my observations, maintaining a clinical and detached tone, I noted the intensity of his gaze, the way his brows knitted together in focus, and how his lips curled into a subtle, uneven smile each time I highlighted something apparent. You always know how to help, he murmured as I finished, his eyes meeting mine in the mirror's reflection. Thank you, Mom. His gaze held a warmth, a subtle appreciation that awakened something profound within me, something I couldn't quite identify. I returned his smile, playfully tousling his already unruly hair out of habit, though he hardly responded as he once did in his childhood, merely letting out a soft chuckle. You're not a kid anymore, I found myself saying, partly to him, partly to myself. He smirked, flexing subtly as if to emphasize a point. No, not for quite a while, and he simply wasn't. The weight of that realization settled in my chest as I took a step back, allowing him the space he needed. The morning unfolded like any other, with the aroma of coffee filling the air. the gentle clinking of silverware, and the soft hum of the radio creating a warm atmosphere around us, Jordan scrolled through his phone lazily, one hand wrapped around his coffee mug. Exuding an air of tranquility, embodying the essence of a man fully immersed in his own existence, yet still present. Still intertwined with mine in a manner that felt more intimate than the bond most sons share with their mothers. I observed him, pondering whether he ever contemplated these matters. About how distinct we were from other families. If he ever noticed how people gazed at us when we shared laughter in public, the way women his age occasionally regarded me with intrigue. Perhaps attempting to grasp the connection we had. He noticed my gaze and lifted an eyebrow. "Excuse me," I shook my head, sipping my coffee. Silence prevails. He wore a sly grin but chose not to press further. That was Jordan, perpetually aware, perpetually observant, yet never one to intrude unless he deemed it significant. After finishing breakfast, we returned to our familiar place. On the couch, a movie flickered in the background, only partially absorbed as we engaged in conversation. Our voices intertwining with the scenes like an impromptu melody. He extended his arm, letting it rest along the back of the couch, hovering just near my shoulder, yet never quite making contact. It felt instinctive, seamless, and yet the heaviness of it, the comfort of his presence, sent a tremor through me that I wished he didn't perceive. "You know," he said suddenly, his voice now softer. Almost contemplative. "I don't believe I've ever truly expressed my gratitude to you." I looked at him, bewildered. "For what purpose?" He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "For all things. For your constant presence, for simply being yourself." His words carried an unspoken weight, igniting a flutter in my chest for reasons I couldn't quite grasp or chose not to confront. I managed a chuckle, attempting to ease the tension in the air. It seems I was left with limited options, wasn't I? He smiled widely, yet his gaze remained locked on me. Perhaps, however, nonetheless. The distance that separated us was electric, the atmosphere denser than it ought to have been. I glanced back at the screen, pretending to be engrossed in the film, wishing the moment would slip away. Yearning for that peculiar tension to fade back into the familiar ease we once shared, yet, I sensed his gaze lingering on me for just a moment longer before he eventually turned away, and I sensed